Hello, listeners. Our guest today is Sharan Sidhu. I met Sharan by way of our common industry friend, karaoke superstar Alan Urmanetta from PNP Pharmaceuticals last year. And then we met Sharan in person at CHFA Regulatory Forum last year as well when she presented on Salix Sciences, who is a co-sponsor of the Fast 5 series. And this year, you are also going to be at the Regulatory Forum, Sharan. So I'll get right into it. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your passions, and your journey into this industry.
Yeah, so Sharan Sidhu, I'm one of the co-founders at Salix Sciences. This is my second go around for a consulting company in NHPs. I think, well, I used to my passions. So my passions way back when I got into this industry and my passions today obviously are different. I'd hope so, given the length of time it's been. But I think really when it comes down to what drives me to do work in this industry is that I'm a scientific and regulatory nerd, right? When it comes down to, right? I love science. I love everything about science. I love experimentations. I love hypothesis. I love all of it. And then putting that together with regulations and see how these two things work together, I think it was a very rare opportunity that we don't see often, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially when I started out in 2012, there were no monographs. You actually needed scientific verification for natural health products, right? There was no monographs. There was no ticking boxes. There was you sat there and you did old fashioned literature reviews. You contacted the scientists. You looked at data, and it was a consolidation of data, right? Outside of, traditional medications and traditional applications, when you wanted to make higher health claims, you actually had to go and do the research. Like I said, there was no monographs. The monographs actually were developed from the collection of evidence that industry was actually putting forward, right? That's where it came from, especially when there was a number of different companies using the same evidence, right? They didn't took that evidence and develop monographs. So, we're talking about using science for something that it was typically used for. So I think really that's where the passion came from, is being able to use my skills as a scientist for something completely different.
Oh gosh, what a flip, right? And then you layer in AI with all the data. What a change over the past 20 years.
Oh yeah.
When it comes to science and regulatory.
Yeah.
I'd love to learn a little bit more about Salix Sciences. You said this is your second go around as a consulting business.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit more?
Yeah, so I think in early days, so when I first started out, I actually, my first job in natural health products, because I used to do clinical trials in traditional drug clinical trials. And my first go round in natural health products was actually working for a manufacturing site in Kelowna called Nature's Formulae. And I didn't know this world existed. I really didn't. So my own personal lifestyle, I did yoga, I practiced meditation, I was into all that. But the natural health product industry was completely new to me. I didn't know it existed. And when I first saw this job advert, I wanted to get out of where I was. But in Kelowna, way back then, there was nothing else. It was tourist or retirement homes, right? That was it, right? So now it's a thriving city, but then there was nothing. So I applied for this regulatory position in Nature's Formula, and it wasn't for the regulatory position itself. It was for scientific research, right? For their products. And that's where I first applied for it. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh, this is amazing. I never knew this existed. And I think I remember the first product I worked on was actually Carver, right? It was Carver. And it was right on the cusp of being so there was no regulatory decision at Health Canada for Carver, but in Europe it was being removed from the shelves because of the toxicity issues and the liver damage issues. And I really got into it. And this was my jam. I really got into it. I pulled all the data. I actually pulled the pharmacovigilance data and looked at the report. And when I looked at it, I kind of broke it all down. I was like, actually, there's only 2 cases in here that are actually directly linked to kava consumption. Everything else was concomitant medication, heavy drug use, heavy alcohol use in conjunction with the kava. So I think when I looked at it like that, I was like, this is like, I could do this. Like, I could actually do this. This is, and so I looked at that, and then I actually went and off on my own accidentally. Actually, I was on mat leave when I incorporated the company, and the reason why was because of Barbara Johnson. She said, "I'm having problems with this one file that you submitted." And I get it, I understand it. She goes, "But I don't." She goes, "Can you just help me out here?" So I did, and then she actually said to me, she's like, "You should just do this," and I was like, "All right then." All right, so
Just like that.
just like that. Yeah. And I remember it was for that problem, or the problem, the issue was with a file that was submitted by Nuco Natural Technologies, and it was for a product called Broca Fusion. It was an ointment. And again, I was just like, oh my gosh, sulfurine's amazing. Like, it does so many great things. And again, I didn't know, right? And it was really funny because Martin Nuco, he is still my client today, right?
Wow.
He was my first client, and I'm still doing stuff for him today, right? So there's kind of like this development of this industry. And I think I kind of grew up in the development of this industry because, like I said, it was very early days when I started. So I think, going from then, when it was actual consulting, actual NHP applications, when I used to interview people to bring on, I used to take them to Nature's Fair, and we used to go through all the products that we'd licensed. Right? It was
Love it.
great, right? And I could literally pinpoint like which products we'd push forward, which ones we'd license, right? Because there was only 3 or 4 consulting companies then, right? And then after that, I think now it's very different. Salix Sciences is very different as a consulting company because we're not just consulting, right? I would say that if I looked at it, we operationalize the regulations, right? So I think what the differentiator is today is, back then I never had been a license holder. I had never owned product development. I had never had to be, involved in getting that product to market. I had never been involved in business objectives, right? When it comes to a product or a group of products, right? But I think when I basically sold that company, and I went into work for a cannabis company, and then I went for a psychedelic company, and it was still natural products because I worked in natural products, not like the drug portions of these.
Yeah.
And I think what I learned, in that gap was a lot of skills and knowledge of how these regulations actually affect a business, right? And they're not a sidebar, right? They're not a sidebar. They are really important, and are integrating those into business objectives, understanding how they can affect a business. I think that now sets us apart, right? Because we've done drug development for ourselves. We've had PLAs for ourselves. We've had to develop COGS, right? We've had to do budgets. And to understand how these regulations actually affect the business and how they need to actually be integrated into those milestones, as well as the scientific strategy. It needs to be integrated into the milestone. Things like, we need to do R&D, right? Let's, with 3 weeks, we're going to get this done. No, it's going to take you 3 months, if not 3 years, right? So, but now understanding that and being on the receiving end of that, I think that really does change how you look at things, how you look at your clients. Because I would say that we are more partners with our clients than we are, consultants, right? Because we get it. We understand the pain points. We know what it works. And we can now go to our clients and say, actually, you need to develop your project plan first, right?
Yeah.
Because the minute you see it on paper and you see how long it's going to take to license that product, your objectives may change a little bit, right? So I think that really does set us apart from where I started, right? From where I started, it was just 100% consulting. Like, we were integrated with our clients. We did a lot of work with our clients. We didn't really get involved in the minutiae of implementing those regulations into their business objectives. If that makes sense.
No, I mean that's huge. The how, I mean, I think about what the regulatory forum's objectives are this year. It's really involving the business with regulatory and making sure they understand and move that forward. And, as a consultant myself, you think about the value add that you bring to your clients. And to me, that just makes sense, right? You're sort of like the extension or the partner of their business when it comes to regulations, which most people don't want to talk about.
Don't want to talk about. Yeah. It is.
Or it'll be sorted later kind of thing. But it's like, oh my gosh, like to your point, it's like
afterthought, right?
or an afterthought kind of thing where it's like you mentioned, really building this into the milestones. And I think that's so important. And I'm curious, you mentioned partnering. What does partnering look like? So could it be an emerging brand that's like, I've got this idea, but we want to make sure that the scientific rigor piece, the regulatory elements are all included and we don't want to misstep. How do you walk your clients through this?
If you look at startups, most of them don't even have any idea that regulations are going to be some of them an issue, right? If they're coming at this from like, okay, we're a brand new brand, and we've had this conversation with so many people, brand new brand, maybe someone's developed something or accidentally happened on something, right? Like, and they want to get it out into the world, right? And then you sit them down and you talk about what category of product they're in, like what the regulations look like, what evidence assessment is, and like what claims they want to make. And you can slowly see like the blood drain out.
It's gonna be a lot of work.
Oh my God.
Right? And and we don't pull punches, right? We want to be honest with people, right? This is how much it's going to take. This is how much time it's going to take. And this is how much it's going to cost, right? Not just from our fees, but like R&D fees, product development fees, stability, validation, verification, all of that stuff, right? It costs money. And then, manufacturing costs, packaging costs, labeling costs. Like the amount of times we've sat down and like, okay, let's sit down and see what these things are going to cost you, right?
Yeah.
Because I think it's almost unfair, right? For people to get into this without actually knowing what they're getting into. And if we can provide as much information at the beginning, right, they'll be better off for it, right? Because we know some people are like, okay, I need to take a breath, right? I need to think about this before I come back, right? Which is far better than getting people into a hole, right? I think people that have been in this industry for a very long time almost have like a responsibility to make sure that other people that come on behind them are successful and they're up for it, because some of them aren't. So,
Laura, have you seen what's coming up in Ottawa this spring?
You mean CHFA's regulatory forum? Absolutely.
It's where industry leaders, policymakers, and Health Canada executives come together to shape the future of natural, organic, and wellness in Canada.
So if you want sharper insights, stronger connections, and real conversations with decision makers, this is the room to be in.
Join CHFA in Ottawa, May 26th to 27th, open to both members and non-members.
Online registration closes May 12, 2026. Learn more at chfa.ca/events.
And now back to munching on molecules.
I agree. I mean, there is certainly that education piece. Most people don't even know what COGS means, the cost of goods sold. And then you factor in like the regulatory costs to get a product approved into launch, before launch. And then what happens if you launch and then you forget all about the stability testing? That to me is like the biggest piece, right? It's so upfront work that you need to invest in before you launch a product.
Yeah, exactly.
So I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah, it's a disservice not to educate some of these new startups.
Yeah. And then, most of the clients that come to us, we work with startups, we work with people that are kind of like that mid-sized business, and then we work with people that, are established. So for startups, I would say, there's a lot of hand-holding if they don't know what they're doing, if they're not from this industry, right? For this mid-sized business, I think we almost act like their science department. Right. So we do kind of fractional CSO services, but we almost act like their science department, or they're developing into this division, or this is a fraction of their business. Right. So they don't need to have us on payroll, for like people like us on payroll. And then for the larger companies, we do a lot of we actually do a lot of clinical trials too, right? So we do clinical research and clinical trials. For the larger companies, we do find that that's what we do mostly for them, is the clinical research on nutraceuticals. We do a lot of clinical research in psychedelics as well. So we do a lot of that work. And we find that for the bigger companies, that's really what we do. For the smaller and mid-sized companies, like I said, for the smaller ones, it's kind of hand-holding and getting to the first few steps. For the mid-sized companies, we do a lot of quality compliance. When I talk about quality compliance, we're talking about, how you get from, startup to pilot to commercial, right? So we do a lot of that. With the GMP requirements, I have many things to say about that, but but it's not new, right? I would say that it's not new. This has been GMP is GMP. It doesn't matter what your product is, right? And I think there's companies that when these new regulations came out or new guidelines came out, we're like, oh my gosh, this is a nightmare. But for those companies that were always doing it, it was just like, oh, we've been doing this forever. So because, it's good practices. It's not about, well, this is what Health Canada wants to see, right? This is about putting out a quality product, right?
Exactly.
And we've heard so many things from so many people, like for labs that we work with, for manufacturers that we work with. Well, Health Canada is not going to ask us for this, right? That's not the point. It really isn't the point. Like, oh yeah, no, we don't have to do validation. We don't have to validate our test. This is one thing I'm hearing a lot of. We don't have to validate our test methods because Health Canada doesn't ask for it. You validate your test methods because that's good practice, right? So it's got nothing to do with whether Health Canada is going to ask for it or not, right? You validate test methods because that's good practice. Otherwise, you don't know whether your test is actually working, right?
Yeah.
So that does, we still see that in the industry when it comes to like things like, well, what Health Canada asks for is like a bare minimum, right? And we're only going to do the bare minimum, or we're going to be high quality, high compliance, because we want to put out a good product, right? It's two different schools of thought, and then there's people that meet in the middle. So
yeah. No, that makes sense.
You and I have always talked about stage gate, so my mind always goes to stage gate, and that's sort of like the foundation when it comes to launching and commercializing a product. There are certain buckets or checkpoints that you cannot compromise on, otherwise it'll cost you so much.
Exactly.
To begin with. Any exciting initiatives that you want to share with us for 2026 or coming up in 2027?
Well, 2026 it's already April this week. I can't believe it. So
it's wild.
No.
Awesome.
Let's go.
Yeah. So Salix, like I said, we're involved in a few different industries, like natural health products. We obviously work in foods, and we work in psychedelics, we work in cannabis. And the things we do for all of them are the same, which is interesting. Like we pretty much do the same thing for all the industries that we work with. We used to do a lot of work in cosmetics, but that's kind of like gone on the lay side a little bit. And we do focus more on our NHPs, nutraceuticals. Supplemented foods is very big for us right now with all the changes that are taking place. And then we have a couple of projects in psychedelics. I think for Salix Sciences itself, we are working on this concept of how you get from so we call it a technology readiness zero, which I didn't even know existed until a meeting that we had recently, a roundtable that we had in Vancouver around the same time at CHFA, is that for startups, that zero, right? That zero, that hand holding, that kind of like, should I, shouldn't I, what do I need, where do I go, right? For startups, that so with technology readiness zero, and then going from there to the next stage, which product development, where you do the product development, how that works, and then you're at pilot. So you've got your technology, you've developed it, and now you're at pilot stage, right? So what do you do at pilot stage, right? Because a lot of brands don't understand that you shouldn't be going from pilot or R&D to commercialization, right? Because the minute you do that, you're going to miss so many things in between that are going to be critical to your formulation being successful at that commercial stage from a quality perspective, right? So if it works at benchtop, it doesn't mean it's going to work in a big
does.
right?
True.
I'm going to put some things together and make 100,000 units. You don't know it's going to work. So what do you do at pilot, and how do you go from pilot to commercialization? So things like challenge studies at your formulation level, right? So right after R&D, right? Or your quality control checkpoints, and then stability, designing stability, verifying stability, and making sure that happens correctly. So we have a gap here in Vancouver, and we've like recognized this gap. I send people over to Alberta. I send people over to out east. There's a couple of facilities out east. You know, Alberta is a big one, right? But we don't have here in Vancouver. But we have so much knowledge here, right? We have so much knowledge here. We've talked to, you know, there's people at BCIT, there's people at Langara. We have a lot of knowledge here, and we are looking at basically putting our facility here in Vancouver, right? Something similar. So we did the first stage. Laura was at the first stage. We had a round table to discuss the gaps. Clearly, we definitely have some gaps. And then the next stage, we actually met with one of the lab partners, and we went to both Langara and to the facility at BCIT by the airport. So we've kind of gone to the second stage. It's moving a lot faster than we had anticipated. So just given, you know, the appetite for this to happen. So yeah, it's evolving. We're, you know, obviously looking at next couple of stages to see if we can make this successful. So
oh my gosh,
lots
ribbon
of moving
cutting
pieces.
2027.
Yeah, definitely keep us posted on those dates.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I think there's a, you know, even when you talk to, like, I was talking to Nuala from the protein pot
industry.
Yeah, so they won the launch pad, and so we had our first meeting with them, and she was telling me that they found it very difficult to find a kitchen where they could actually make their product. You know, it's things like that we see a lot more out east, right?
Yes.
A lot more resources available for small businesses out east. It'd be nice to have that here as well. Right?
Definitely. The accessibility piece, especially when we're so close to so many, for example, like natural resources, and the opportunity to plug a lot of these, you know, perhaps interesting ingredients or better for you products to put them into our pipeline as well for new innovation. Speaking of innovation, you know, yourself working alongside brands, you're on the NHP side, supplemented foods, you know, food products. What are you seeing in terms of trends? Perhaps some trends that are kind of coming to the surface more so for 2026.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, mushrooms don't seem to want to go away, right?
Yeah,
No.
I love them.
I love mushrooms.
I love them.
So yeah, so mushrooms are still going strong, and it's interesting because I think once we see a downtick in that kind of psychedelic renaissance, that we might see a downtick in like functional mushrooms. But you know, they're going strong, and they've been going strong for a while. So I think those are here to stay. I would say that supplemented foods is going to be an area of growth. It does reduce, it reduces compliance for pre-market compliance. We're looking all post-market compliance instead. However, I would say I spent a couple of days last week actually drawing out a label to see if I could fit in.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Oh gosh.
Front of package labeling. You have supplemented caution identifier. You have all these additional things that need to go on this package, and it's just like, oh my gosh, right? So, and you have companies going back and reformulating because of front of package, right? Like reformulating to make sure that they don't have to say high in sugar, right? And I had one client, she has a very natural, it's a natural product. It pretty much is a natural product. It's a food, natural, but it's naturally sourced, minimally processed. But because it is processed, right, she has to add her front of package for sugar, except it's all naturally occurring. There's nothing in it that, so, and then it's like scouring those regulations to see if there's any exemptions, and that's I literally did that this weekend to see like what happens when you have front of package and you have supplemented food, but there's like exemptions for one, there's no exemptions for the other, but there's exemptions for both of them. So it's insane. Like it's insane. Like the minutia and the detail that you like with all these layered regulations and layered requirements, it's easy to miss things, right? It's very easy to miss things. But I still think it's a very exciting time for supplemented foods, and I think we're going to see a lot more of those out there. And again, I don't know whether people are aware of what they are and what they bring to the market. But I think it's a it's a good time for that category of product, and it's very unique to Canada. Like we don't see this anywhere else, right? So great job, William, on this category of product, right? So I know he was working on it forever and a day. I think since the first time I heard about it was 2013 when where there was an issue. Well, the issue was caffeinated energy drinks, right? Like it was
right, yeah, the rock
food,
stars and the
right?
Yes.
yeah.
But they all had NPN numbers, right? So it was that transition. So it's not food, it's not an NHP. So where does it go? And I think this was William Yam's brainchild, right? And I think it's been very successful. So, what else do I? The whole, we're seeing a lot of men's health actually. There's a lot of men's health, and because like women don't talk about men's health, like we like women's health and health products, but there is a lot of men's health products out there. I have, obviously my husband's same age as me, so he's always talking about like men's health stuff. And then I have a 19-year-old who's just like, well, what can I take? Right. So, so there's a lot of men's health products. And I think as women, we don't really pay attention to that market. Right. But it is out there, and I think it's growing. And then obviously, like there's all the diet supplements, the GLPs, all of those things. They again not going away anytime soon, I don't think. So
yeah, lots of exciting trends, and I'm sure that you're just seeing it at the forefront and working with all these brands. And I almost think that we need to have a whole session on supplemented foods, Laura.
I think
like
so.
we need to do like a deep dive for listeners, because I think this is definitely an area of interest for many brands that are looking to innovate differently.
Maybe get Dr. William Chan on the.
He would
he love? Oh,
yeah.
We should get him.
Actually, noted.
A brainchild of all the ranks. He's a great speaker.
He does. He's a great speaker. Yeah.
Cool.
Amazing.
Maybe, let's do that. Are we at the end of
we're
our
at that
episode?
time.
We could talk about so many other things.
So many things. We'll have to do a recap session after the forum, I think, would be really, I think, timely. But is it time for a tradition? Laura, do you have the lineup?
Previous guest?
Yes.
Yeah, unless there's something else that you'd like to talk about, Sharan. We are getting close to that end of our show here.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever.
Okay, so our tradition is a question from a previous guest, and this one comes from our friend Michael Bentley, CEO of Sarasil. So when he was interviewed by us, he had two questions. So this is his backup second question. We all know him, so it's like this comes naturally to him. So his question is, if you have a mentor, what is the most pressing question that you have for your mentor? But as we found out, our conversation before the show, Sharan, you are a mentor and you have mentees that you help and support. So maybe a question, we'll turn this around, is what is the most often asked question from your mentees, or anything else that they keep are pressing or challenged for them?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest questions I get is how did you get here? Right? Like, so how did you get here? Right? And how can, what can we do to do the same? Right? I got here by accident, right? Like a series of events that just led me to where I am, right? I just roll with it, right? I think for a lot of the people that are looking to get into like the NHP industry from a regulatory consulting perspective, right? There was no courses when we started out. There barely any regulations. Like we were still waiting for the rule book, right? But I think it really is a matter of hands-on, right? Being hands-on. Regulations, I suppose the licensing process itself is not what it used to be. Like before it was, you did research. I only hired scientists at one point, right? Because everybody had to have the skills to do literature review, right? And do like understand scientific information and data and how to parse that and then how to translate that and communicate that. Now, it's pretty administrative unless you're in that class 3. Right? It's pretty administrative. So it's very different. So when people say, oh, they want to get into this, what exactly are they looking for? Because if they're looking for an administrative position today in the regulations, I would say yes, right? If they're looking for something more exciting, then probably not it's not as exciting as it used to be, because it used to be exciting, right? Now, like filling out that PLA, like, it's pretty administrative, right?
Yeah.
So I would say, it's not the same as it used to be. It was very in depth. There was a lot of work that had to be done to get a submission in. Now, you get a submission in and it's pretty easy to do, and then you're waiting for a very long time, which is something else that's changed. And I would say look to, where the innovation is, right? Like, where is the innovation if you want something exciting? Especially if you're a scientist, there's still a lot of work that can be done, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, all good. In terms of recommendations, you're seeing, and hearing a lot about hands-on, right? Getting that hands-on experience and just diving into it, taking that action as well. Is what yeah. Excellent. Well, you know what? We'd love to hear your question to share with the next guest on our show, not knowing who they are.
Not knowing who they are. I would say my question was, if you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
I love it.
Would you still be doing what you're doing, Sharan?
Yeah. Well, how would you answer that?
I was doing this, but like I said, I happened on this. Like, this was not planned. Like, I thought it was going to be a principal investigator sitting in a lab, with stuff. So am I, no, I did not think I was going to be here. I am very glad I do what I do. I have to say, I'm very lucky in that regard, that I enjoy the work that I do. But if I wasn't doing this, I would probably be a principal investigator in a lab somewhere, right?
Nice.
Yeah.
So
That's
cool.
So good.
I mean, same with Christine and I. We just stumbled into podcasting and consulting, right?
And consulting, and
no linear path.
And it's about exploring. And I actually just finished like this, and I was telling Laura about this, but it was about like designing your life, right? And being in innovation, development, always having a curious mind. It's like, we think about prototyping, these quick tests, the pressure test, these ideas. Why not do that in our lives, right? I think there is that incredible opportunity to think about different pathways and prototyping by taking action. So I think there's lots of lessons in that and what you've shared with us today. Sharan, what are some of the best ways for people to find you? How can people reach out? How can people connect if they're interested to learn more?
Yeah, so just our website, salixsciences.com. I'm going to be honest, it's not the greatest website. It's one of those things that you put up because you have to put it up, and then no one actually went back and fixed it. So it's just still sitting there. Or through LinkedIn, right? You can find Salix Sciences through LinkedIn. You can find me through LinkedIn. Yeah.
Amazing.
That's great.
Thank you.
And you'll be at the CHFA Regulatory
And
Forum.
we will be there. Yeah, we'll be at the CHFA Regulatory Forum. We're happy to be co-sponsoring it this year. It's, I know that, it being in Ottawa with, like, traditionally, you used to have your East and West in Toronto and Vancouver, but I think it's great. I think it's great to have a focused session on, regulations, and to be able to have the regulators at the forum, I think makes a huge difference. Yeah.
Big time.
Agreed. Oh, thank you again so much for your time. Thank you again, Sharan.
Thank you
so much.
All right, bye.
Bye.